Он хранит то, что скрыто. Он сделает так, что небо будет свободным от туч. Там, где взойдет звезда Аделаида. Прикосновение руками. Я слышал, что время стирает все. Ты слышишь стук сердца? Эта коса нашла на камень. И нет ни печали, ни зла.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, because I'm not very well acquainted with Mac system, and I always use mouse, and that's the problem. So I work on PC. But anyway, there was video, but you didn't see. So try to imagine, you know. That's how it worked at that time. In the early 80s, you always had to try to imagine something because there was nothing in the lyrics. For example, this is the chorus sounds like north wind will awake me in the place where the star Adelaida rises. So that's the essence. So you can interpret it in any way. It's a kind of example of mystical perception of reality and metaphorical language, which was on top at this time. So it's kind of Aesopian language, which a lot of rock musicians used to express themselves and to get rid of any problems with the authorities. So in 1981, Aquarium became the member of Leningrad Rock Club. It was an official public organization which was aimed to control concert and artistic activities of the rock musicians. Of course, it was made under close, with the help of the KGB to control musicians, but we didn't know that. We heard a lot of bands. There was almost 50 bands, independent, not paid, not known, and they made great music, and we were old friends because we knew that we are, we opposed ourselves to the whole Soviet society and Soviet way of thinking. I can show you one more example, which is also very important. That's the kind of mood of those times. A band called Kino, and Viktor Tsoi was the main singer. So the song is called I'm a Slacker. So it's, I'm wandering alone, I don't know what to do, nobody's home, I'm useless as a pile of trash. I'm a slacker, mama. So that was a common feeling for a lot of us. So we were kind of aliens in this Soviet oriented society. So that's why we were together, we were friends, and this band became very big in the end of 80s and till nowadays. It's a big star, and I will show you one of their songs which is still played on a lot of protest meetings that are happening right now. So, but it will be later. So we should say that we perceived any ironic, psychedelic, original, creative efforts as a protest, because they had nothing in common with Soviet music, unvaried and bleak. So we should see one more example. Yeah, from the early 80s, Vasily Shumov and his band Center from Moscow. They have had a rock laboratory after 1984. It was the same as Rock Club in Leningrad, but this was probably 1 year before it was organized in Moscow. So this song is called "Everything Is Ours," and probably you will know. You will hear the words. Some of the words are international. Okay, I'll try to.
Все наше навсегда, навсегда, навсегда. Все наше навсегда. Пушкин, Евтушенко, Иванов, Петрова, Курчатов, Калашников, Пинтиков, Шпунтикова навсегда, навсегда. Все наше навсегда, навсегда, навсегда. Все наше навсегда. Вспомним.
Yeah. So probably you've heard. Oh shit. You've heard words like matryoshka, balalaika, samovar, sputnik. So it's a kind of mockery mockery of Soviet patriotism, which was very spread around at this time. These songs inspired many people to live their own way, which was not Soviet at all. To have another non-Soviet relationship with reality. That's how the idea of society of independent individuals was brought into real life. People did their personal small protests against the system at work, in school, at home, in the streets, knowing that they are not alone already. We should, so any action, it can be hooligan action on stage, or just some artistic unusual performances were considered as a protest against the way of life which was dictated from Kremlin. And one of the examples, I think a good example, is a Zvuki Mu band, also from Moscow. And the song is called I'm a Great Pigeon. And it's the Grey Pigeon who sings it. You will see now.
вместо асфальта мне снится земля и солнце. Я хлебные крошки ищу на земле, ты знаешь меня, но и тоскуешь по мне, может ты. Я грязен, я болен, моя шея тонка, свернуть эту шею не дрогнет рука у тебя.
So, the song is about a great pigeon who speaks. He says, I'm worse than you. I'm a great pigeon. I'm the most useless piece of shit in this world. But in the end, I can fly. So you will kill me, and I'm ready for it, but I can fly. Yeah, I like this song. It was very popular. So Zvuki Mu, it was very interesting psychedelic band in Moscow. Meanwhile, in St. Petersburg, there were a lot of artists and painters and dancers who were trying to get together with rock musicians, trying to perform together in rock club too, and among them was the auction. That was the name of the band from from Leningrad at that time. So I would like to present you a small part of it. Нет, песня да, но два раза видео открылось. Just a moment. I will try to. Somebody. Where is your help, my dear? You were in time. So that was it. Sorry. So it's they don't touch me because they don't know. Oh, because they know I'm bad. That's the essence of the story, and it's called Nepman. There was a new economic policy in Russia in the middle of the 1920s. It was announced by Kremlin, by Soviet government, and so you can be more free, economically free. It lasted for 5 years, and then it was all gone. So it's kind of irony about being this businessman of a new age. It's all about 1985, and at this time Gorbachev came to power and announced the new policy of glasnost. It meant easing the rules of media censorship. That was for us very. We tried to believe in it. So private property and business were allowed, as well as joint ventures with Western countries, Western companies. Relations with the West became closer. Many of the books that were prohibited before were officially published. Among them were novels of Platonov, Zamyatin, Bulgakov, Pasternak, and many more. The policy of glasnost was very important for us as a formal permission to speak freely and openly. It has become the deciding factor in political changes, but largely contributed to the process leading to the fall of the United USSR. It was a new trend, and we tried to express our opinions more openly. So that was kind of a line. From that time, we decided that we have the right to say it in more open way, to say about the problems. So, and that's how it started. I mean, the influence probably, but everything. So, I would like to show you one of televisor song where I was the singer. Just a moment. I still can't. The player works in a very different way from the players I'm used to. Okay, let's try. Oh. The song is called "Your Daddy is a Fascist." So this was the song "Your Daddy is a Fascist." So it's one of the lines I can translate to you. It's there are ideas covered with dusts, with a dust covered with dust. Yeah, there are ideas made in steel. No matter what's in there, the only thing that matters who is behind them. That's so. It was a song against the generations of our fathers, and of course against the whole system of totalitarian suppressing of young people and free people in the country. That was what I had in mind when I wrote the lyrics. So there were a lot of problems with different songs and with different bands. Problems of censorship at first in 1986. There was a censorship, so we had to we had to avoid it. So we were asked several times not to perform some particular song on the festival, for example, but we nevertheless we did it, and in 2 years it was all gone. So it was impossible to prohibit everybody, because everybody started to sing on the censored songs. And Your Daddy is a Fascist was among them too. So we kind of tested the limits, and we survived the limits of this glasnost thing. In the end, they, I don't know why, but they just stopped this censorship, and It was very chaotic and very free. When for us it was the fresh breath. So there were at least 3 more bands which took part in this breakthrough in breaking the censorship. I can say it was Alisa, DDT, and Object of Mockery. We called ourselves the Red Wedge. Red Wedge. I don't know why, but it was very pompous. But anyway, and we made concerts in different cities, like trying to break through the censorship over there. In each city we went together. So I would like to present you Alisa first with its song called Totalitarian Rap.
Totalitarny rap, это вам не хат, тоталитарный рэп, это факт. Тоталитарный рэп сформирован годами подбой сирен и лай собак. Тоталитарный рэп, это вариант, приносит церкви под склад. Тоталитарный рэп, это танец, шаг вперед, 2 шага назад. Тоталитарный рэп, это активизм. Тоталитарный рэп, это акт. Тоталитарный рэп, это взгляд пряник и совершенно конкретный кулак. Тоталитарный рэп, это эксперимент по перестройке сознания масс. Тоталитарный рэп, это ласковый голос. Предъявите ваш аусвайс.
So it's totalitarian rap is not fun, it's just a fact. It was formed by wailing of sirens and barking of dogs. That was kind of how to say symbolic song for that time. And the lonely days of independent creative thinkers were over. And after all, it became necessary for people to hear their favorite bands alive. So that's when the amateur musicians started touring all over the USSR. Bands from Moscow, St. Petersburg and Sverdlovsk started to come to the other cities and were perceived as people who could dispel all the lies and Soviet propaganda and ignore the norms of Soviet society. That's how I think Russian rock influenced people's minds at that time. So I would like to introduce you to DDT band, which was among the Red Wedge, as I told you.
Администрация прекратит концерт, ребята.
Policeman in the Rock Club, that's the name of the
Так,
song.
следующая песня посвящается как раз органам охраны правопорядка.
Сегодня лейтенант сказал, старшина, повез снаряд на Рубинштейна. Смотришь волком бодрее вид, порезвися там, ты ж не инвалид. Но ты за порядок отвечаешь мне, как часто бывает, как на войне. А если что-то будет не так, инструкции знаешь, дневника.
it's about the policeman who appeared to, who was sent to control the rock club, and he was supposed to be the fan of rock music, but he had to give orders. So that's what he said. Order is order. Where are you going? Sit down. Shut up. Don't shout. Don't sing. But still, he is already a rock fan. That's a kind of usual situation at that time. So even the policemen, they were involved in this underground rock movement. But still, they had to act strictly according to the order. So that's how new rock community appeared, and it was as big as the USSR itself. These people didn't consider themselves Soviet, and they didn't think that way. And meanwhile, Gorbachev still spoke of building socialism, some new kind of socialism, softer, with a human's face, as he put it at that time. As for us, we didn't fought for economic changes. We were trying to expose the lies, and that was probably it was not a very. We didn't think much about it. It was just spontaneous movement. So we were tired of all those Soviet lies. And Gorbachev was also criticized quite harshly at that time because we thought he's talking too much and not doing anything. In the end, we were really, it was boring, and we were tired of in 1988, we were already tired, and a lot of songs were produced also about him too, because he was very shy to make any reforms in the end. But anyway, we are grateful that he kind of started it. So this is the band Object of Mockery with the song This Is Our Epoch. This is time for us. Yeah, so Hurricane Perestroika is our natural habitat. Every one of us is a destroyer of social anesthesia. It's time for us, it's our revolution, that's what the song is about. And I want to remind that I showed you 4 bands which called themselves the Red Wedge and trying to break through from the censorship from Vladivostok till Kiev. And it was very funny because we felt that we are kind of politicians because we were invited. We didn't search for any concerts. We were invited from the different cities because they heard our tapes and they said, we need you to break through here. Come please and play, because our communists and Komsomol, this young league communists, they are still struggling for the Soviet Union, for those crazy communist ideas, and we want to you to give the fresh outlook, fresh view on what's going on in the capitals. So that's what we tried to do. And of course it works all over the country, and big cities from all over the country started to produce more and more rock bands with their own view on the society and on life in the Soviet Union itself. New ideas. And I can show you, for example, the band called Nautilus Pompilius from Sverdlovsk, which was and still is very popular. Here it is, Nautilus Pompilius. You probably know. That name.
Был безупречно чистым, был прозрачным, стал абсолютно белым. Видно, кто-то решил, что зима, и покрыл меня белым. Был бы белым, а все же был бы чистым, пусть холодным, а все же с ясным взором. Но кто-то решил, что война, и покрыл меня черным. Я вижу цвет, но я здесь не был. Я слышу цвет, я чувствую цвет. Я знать не хочу всех тех, кто уже красит небо. Я вижу песню вдали, но я слышу лишь марш левый, марш правый. Я не видел страшнее, чем толпа цвета хаки. Был бы черным, да будь он самый чертов.
Okay, that was the song about, it was called Hockey Colored Globe. The only thing I can hear forward much, I haven't seen anything as horrible as Hockey Colored Globe. That's the essence, probably. So it's an anti-militaristic and very popular song at that time, because this Soviet doctrine, Soviet ideology, was based on the love of people to its own army. So we were taught to respect army, to be grateful for the defense that they provide. That's a funny thing. This 5 years from 1985 till 1990 was the only time in Russia when musicians were generating new purposes and senses, comparing to the previous time. These ideas were needed, and this was the main motivation for creativity. There was no show business. There was no money involved. So everything was done to express to express ourselves. So, and the motivation was just new ideas, new music, and fresh breath. In this, I consider it a unique time. Probably we will have something like this in the future, and we're having something right now. But in 1981 or 91, sorry, there was a big change in Russia. The USSR stopped to exist. In 1981, we had the August coup, when the members of the government of the USSR tried to take control of the country from Gorbachev. They were against his reform program, but they didn't succeed because the mass campaign of civil resistance led by Boris Yeltsin succeeded. Shortly after the coup, Gorbachev resigned, and that was the end of the USSR. In the beginning, in the beginning of 90s, rock musicians and me myself, we were indulged in the euphoria of victory. We could tour all over the country, no censorship, we were popular, and we decided that it's all done. We can we can celebrate. So we spread, let's say. So the ideas for new songs were quite different, and we were not comrades, let's put it anymore. But we kept good relationship, and we watched each other, but we couldn't imagine that anything that this backward movement can happen in the future. So probably that's the main thing we could consider next time. When so during 10 years, it was the time of big changes, economical and political changes. So, of course, people were shocked, especially those people who didn't expect this at all, and new bands. Musical styles became more various, but the need for new ideas and protest songs receded. In the beginning of the 90s, the most popular songs were very easy to dance to and often had funny and meaningless lyrics, like this one by the band called Two Planes, from still from Leningrad. It's called Bambula. So there's nothing to translate here. This is a bird's language. Is it possible to say? Yeah.
They call it Swahili.
Swahili.
That's the band. That's what they
Yeah.
announced always. They sing in Swahili.
Okay. Yeah. So as a result of it, musicians started to generate entertainment instead of ideas. They turned into rock stars living of their legacy. Commercial component of rock music was becoming more and more important. Probably it's a good idea to show you Agatha Christie band with a very popular song on the war. Because it was one of the most sold albums, commercially very successful, and this song was one of the most popular from this album.
И послушай, что я скажу. Я терпел, но сегодня я ухожу. Я сказал, успокойся, и рот закрой. Вот и все, до свидания, черт с тобой. Я на тебе давно в войне. Но я устал, окончил бой, беру портфель, иду домой. Окончен бой, зачем ходой, и не осталось ничего. А мы живем, а нам с тобой повезло на зло.
So when we have sex, I feel like I'm at war, and I'm tired. The fight is over, and I take my wine and I go home. That's the chorus of this song, and it was yeah, as I told you, very popular, and it's very also symbolized the middle of the 90s. Some artists at that time got close to the new establishment, new authorities, to the reformers who came to power. And it seemed that rock music should not have any influence on the society. Russian people were shocked by the economical changes and didn't need this for sure. In 1986, authorities managed to use rock musicians for amplification of the political influence during Boris Yeltsin election campaign called Vote or Lose. For their performances, the bands were paid a lot of money. Among the participants were Nautilus Pompilius, the one I show, Alisa, Boris Grebenshikov, Aquarium, Brava, Andrei Makarevich, Time Machine, and Spleen. I can show you example of how this election campaign was organized. This is one of the performances in one of the city with Yeltsin in front. That's how it was. It was very funny. Although he had some problems with his heart at that time, and but he managed to get himself together and did a great tour with some of the bands all over the country. It's funny anyway. So at the same time, the new bands like Pilot Band appeared. That's a kind of time of clones. I should put it like that. So they were trying to copy musically and lyrically the Leningrad rock club bands, and there were a lot of them. But still, probably no ideas and no ideas needed, and they were very popular at that time. And one of them is King and the Joker. They were playing kind of horror punk, as they put it. So it's like dark fairy tales about cannibals and all that horror stuff. They put themselves as a punk band, but still I didn't find much of punk ideas in their lyrics. Okay, so this is The King and the Joker. So there were a lot of them, and all of them were supported by Nasha radio station, which appeared at that time, and invented their own radio format. And they, you have to, it was very funny thing. You have to sound like each other. So they were clones of Alisa, clones of DDT, clones of previous Moscow and rock bands, Auction, and there was a special sound which should not irritate, which was welcomed by this radio station. So it was a commercial time. They made a lot of money out of it, but probably they spoiled the taste of the young generation, as I think about it, because everything was kind of alike. So it was radio format. 3 minutes, 3.5, not more, for a song, and the song should remind you of another song, which should remind you of another song. It's a march of clones, you know. We will try to get to the present time. In 1999, Yeltsin has resigned and introduced his successor, Vladimir Putin. And a few words about the economical situation during these 9 years with Yeltsin. Russia had new economic model, and it was not easy for Russian people to adapt. Many people lost their job, and that's why a lot of Russians voted for Yeltsin's successor, Vladimir Putin, in 2000. So when Putin came to power, the world oil prices went up 5 times, and it was somewhat $100 per barrel. So it felt like the tough years are over, and the majority of people enjoyed the possibility to buy new cars, spend their vacation in Turkey or Egypt, and take a mortgage. Putin also declared to finish the intense phase of second war in Chechnya, which was good for his image within the country. But in the end, he didn't keep his promises to build a democratic state. He was building new authoritarian state, and after 2003, it was clear for us too, and the new protest movement began. And of course, censorship has hardened, and there were several meetings of protest. They were called marches of dissenters in from 2007, and which led nowhere. But still, we were standing on the streets. We were trying to stop this going backwards, this way backwards. And they were also, in the end, when they started to dismiss all those meetings, there were a lot of bands who were proposing direct action resistance. It's a stronger resistance with some forced actions, and one of them probably is the last tanks in Paris. It is from St. Petersburg, and they're playing it with the leader of Agatha Christie band, but he is now very deeply involved in the protest. So it's here. There's nothing left to do. There is no use in peaceful marches, so there is only way out: make bombs, not love. That's what the song is about. But anyway, those who tried to make it were immediately caught and put to prison for several years, and there were a lot of anarchist bands who took part in it, but they were arrested before they could do anything. And then in 2012, Putin has become the president for the third time, now for 6 years, as the result of a rather cynical trick with the constitution. Before that it was 4 years. So he changed the constitution to, to stay for a long time. It also caused a lot of protests in the streets, and a lot of new bands like Noise MC, Face, Ice 3 Peak, but not at that time. Yeah, it started also from Pussy Riot, probably, who made their performance in a church, and it was called Mother Mary Banish Putin. I should show you just a little bit of it. They were imprisoned for 2 years for this. Yeah, that's how it was. Nobody expected that the arrest would be a result of this performance, but I think they didn't either. But in the end, they became a kind of symbol of struggle against Kremlin for the last decade. And there was a big protest on Bolotnaya Square, like 100,000 people there protesting against re-election of Putin. There were several festivals to protect the girls, to help the girls to get out, and a lot of bands took their. We organized one in St. Petersburg, and a lot of famous bands took part there, and also anarchists, left anarchists. Yeah, so all the prisoners will hear our voice, and the flame of freedom will lighten their way. Nobody will forget, and nobody will forgive. That's what song is about. It's a Brigadier. I don't know, Flame of Freedom the song is called, but the band is Brigadier. Yeah. Is there a word like that? Brigadier?
Brigadier, yeah.
Okay.
Brigadier.
So, the situation was getting hot, and especially after the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the war in Ukraine. It was a crucial point of history. After that, Putin finally believed in his mission to unite the lands of Russia to fight for so-called Russian world. It's a kind of mind disease, I suppose. But anyway, I think that he is serious in that. Sometimes I think. So it's not a cynical attitude as it was before. In 2017, a new wave of mass protest followed in Russia. A cause for that was the results of investigation of corruption activities as well as the upcoming presidential elections, which were not expected to be fair. This time, opposition leaders like Alexei Navalny in particular were able to attract a large number of young people, including students and high school kids. At last, they showed interest in civic activity. I mean, the students, because during 10 years before, we were always trying to invite students to take part in the protest, but it was not easy, especially those colleges like St. Petersburg University. They were very frightened by their bosses, they tried not to take part in these meetings in order to stay and to study in the university. They were threatened. That was a problem. So much is continued in 2018, 2019, and turned into mass protest actions again. The authorities responded by increasing repression of dissenters, and many of them were sentenced to real prison terms. There were tens of new laws restricting the right of gathering together, right for meetings, for speech, for internet. A lot of people were sentenced just for putting their approval on the Facebook, approval on some provocative picture, let's say. But still, new names like Pornofilmy band and rap bands came out and decided to express their protest during the last time. I can show you several examples. One of them is called Porno Films, which is very popular right now, and the song is called Russia is for the sad ones. We have Россия для русских, and this one sounds Россия для грустных. Russia for the Russians, and this one Russia for the sad ones. Okay, so and. Yeah, a little bit, yeah. It's a happy punk rock. But anyway, they got ideas and they got this, how to say, statement, which is kind of new because before that, during the last 10 years, it was very difficult to find among rock bands. So, and now rap bands are also very popular. They decided to raise their voice against the prosecution of their friends and to protest against the situation in Russia. One of them is Noise MC. who is also very popular, and the song is called "Let Them Die." The song is about the policemen who take protesters, who arrest protesters, who take protesters as dangerous aliens, and so he's kind of crazy policeman, and therefore he must kill them. So it's a very urgent song, like 3 months ago it was written. After a lot of protesters were beaten in Moscow, and 1,400 were arrested.
Леха в детском саду мечтал стать космонавтом. В камуфляжном скафандре со щитом, автоматом, дубинкой бить гуманоидов. Ненавидел твой фильм про кота и Леопольда. Гуманоиды враги, гуманоидам не больно. Гуманоид может выглядеть как девушка или школьник, но это наебка и только. Леха подрос, у Лехи щетиный бас. Леха плечист, Леха ругаст. У Лехи приказ, что на собачий язык переводится в фас. И язык гуманоидов далекий мяс. И все это значит только одно: тебе казаки пиздец, маленький пидорас. А хозяева кормят сумки, хозяева сдали жилье. Уже подрастают щенки, да, космонавтика это мое. Думает Леха, снимая свой шлем после смены. Он как белка и стрелка, такой же верный и смелый. Катается в массе, как сын шестеренка системы. Пришельцы хотят сделать из нашей планеты второй пояс астероидов. Стойте, ну-ка сюда, куда вы торопитесь, гуманоиды? Пришельцам капут, пришельцы нам врут. Пришельцы свои тянут щупальца к нашей кормушке, а значит пришельцы умрут.
So that's it, the whole song. Yeah, but anyway, I'm very impressed of this rap uprising, and rap performers like Oxymoron, who is very popular, this Noise MC, the one called Face, Ice 3 Peak, it's not rap, but it's kind of close to that. They're decided at last to pronounce their own, say a few words about the protest, which is good, and I hope that's the beginning of the influence that we will feel in the next years. And they're starting a new wave of protest, and more and more young people are getting involved in that. And I hope, I'm pretty sure that they will influence social and political changes in Russia someday. But they anyway, nothing can disappear, and their energy will turn into a new change in Russia. The only thing is time. We should wait for that. So it's still going on, and there is an influence, and I hope it will be strong. So that's the end of the story. Thank you for listening.
Well, now it's the time for our Q&A portion. So please, whatever questions you might have.
Yeah.
I have several questions. Maybe I'll just start with one. My name is Max. I'm a big fan. Growing up listening to you. I still have your first album. My first question is: you speak very good English. How? Where do you live?
It's not good at all. I forgot a lot because I've learned in Leningrad University at Department of Philology, but it was in the early 80s.
You live in Russia.
Right now I live in Stockholm because there was a kind of hard time. I decided to, but I'm visiting Russia every 2 months. But it's probably not so easy to perform songs like we do right now on a big, on the meetings, because of new laws that came out during the last 2 years.
And my second question relates to one of your most famous songs. My father, your father is a fascist. So I'd say that growing up listening to this song, I guess most of us, I certainly did not really understand the meaning. I mean, likely it was cool, but could you, in your own words, define what you think, what you thought fascism was, what you thought it was then, and what do you think fascist is now? Like right now, there's a lot of people throwing this word around. They say Trump is a Hitler. Like, I think its meaning has been reduced to just a curse word that you throw at anybody you don't like. So what did you think then when you wrote the song, and what do you think now? What fascist is?
That's a question for 3 hours. No, I told you that at that time it was something opposite to communism. So fascism, but the song says that no matter which flags you're waving, red or the only thing that matters who is behind it and what you're doing. So that's a kind of I put the symbol of equality between fascism and communism, and for me fascism was kind of so communism was kind of fascism, so kind of totalitarian ideology which neglects the needs of individual and puts it in the idea for the masses. I'm not sure if, if my English is understandable. So that was the struggle, because we have this idea of nation, which is the most important for all, should be the most important for all the people of the USSR. So we should support we should die for the strength of nation. We should think of in a traditional Russian Soviet way about our values and our goals. The same, I think, is going. The fascism is aimed on. So it's no individual. It's the people who are together making some big national task fulfilling. That's what for me is fascism and communism too. So and now of course you're right. It sounds nobody knows what it is now, but still. Probably here lies the difference. It's still about making big national effort to achieve big goals with big victims. So victims doesn't matter, and people's lives doesn't matter. Individuals doesn't matter. That's what Russia is trying to put on their slogan right now, again. So that's the way we are going. So only traditional values, no rights of no human rights, because it's there. Oh, it's a very long story. Human rights, it's a poison, they say right now. Because when you're trying to please everybody, you will make a soft society which cannot unite itself to fulfill big national goals. So we shouldn't orient ourselves on the human rights. And of course, the opinion of one man means nothing. So we could easily forget about it. Only big goals, big victims, big wars, and the pride for your country. That's what matters in fascism and in Russianism now. That's what I think about it. But it's a long story, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm still think through your talk. I'm wondering whether rock music is still the main music of protest today, as it was in the late 80s, or whether other genres of music have superseded in this role. You mentioned rap music. I keep also seeing in protest stages Arcadia Cots, this band.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether you could speak musically, what genres do today's protest musicians, who most clearly affiliate themselves with the Moscow and Petersburg protests today, what genres do they represent?
You're right. As I told before, rap music and mixtures, different mixtures of rap music and rock music, like Noise MC, it's a mixture of rap and rock. They're very influential right now, and they got the nerve, they got the future, but still nobody neglects rock bands. Rap is more, let's say, how to say, popular, of course, because they were getting popular during the last 10 years. So now they had good wealthy level, so now they can take a risk, and I'm glad they started to do it, because I always thought that I liked rap very much, but I started in '84, and there were bands like Public Enemy, for example. That was rap for me, and I was a bit ironic to the rap bands which are singing about gold and girls and cars and their own inside bullshit, but not touching the surround world. And I'm very glad they're in it, and I hope the future is theirs. But anyway, it will be mixed of different genres. Psychedelic electronic music like Ice Free Peak is also there. So everybody's getting together like it was in 1985. Okay?
What was your relationship with Victor Tsoi?
With who?
Victor Tsoi?
Oh, I think we were kind of friends, not close friends, but we shared one room for rehearsals. It was our room, and they they asked us to give for a permission to rehearse there, and we were. I played with the guitarist from Kino before Kino was formed. This band Kino. And he was a nice guy, and we spent a lot of time together. We played concerts together. It was like big family, because we were alone in this Soviet city, and we had no perspectives. We were bullied by the society. So when you look like rock musician, you can be beaten by some skinheads. Easily. It was like that in the Soviet Union, and you can be taken, you can be arrested, but police, of course, arrested. So that's why we were together, and we were very kind to each other. Yeah.
So you mentioned that there were like rock clubs that were run by the KGB. What influence do you think that had on the message that they were singing about, and also how that led to the evolution of like using rock and using music as a way of protesting?
They were trying to control. So that was the idea to organize one rock club, but it was not a club. It was just an organization where independent rock bands can perform, and only there. You have to have their permission to perform in some other city, and then you can, after strict censorship, you can perform there. And of course, the idea was just to have all those hooligans together yeah, to control every move. So they're watched every minute. But in the end, in 1986, they were, for example, so unexpectedly irritated and frightened that we are trying to get out of control. So we were threatened several times, and some were invited to talk to KGB officers. So you shouldn't do that. We will take you to prison, and that there were a lot of threats. But then somehow the whole atmosphere, because it was done by a lot of bands simultaneously. They also try to change their minds, because some of them were already fans of us, of rock bands, from rock clubs. It's a new generation of KGB officers which were more progressive. And of course they want to have the light socialism with them on top, and rock bands playing. So they were trying to convince the elder comrades to let it go like this. But in the end it got out of control, so I think it was not specially done. It happened because of the whole atmosphere of change which spread all over the country. Yeah? Okay, yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned that anarchism was important in some of the newer punk bands. Has anarchism always been an important influence in, Russian musical protests, and is it still important? If so.
Anarchism, like a political movement, didn't exist in 80s, but we were anyway. We were kind of natural anarchists with no knowledge about that, I think. You saw this Victor Tsoi song, I'm a Slacker, and we thought of ourselves as anarchists, so we talked about that a lot, that we don't need the state, we don't need the government, and nearly all of us were kind of mentally were anarchists, although we didn't belong to any political organizations. Nowadays they are more structured, and they had different branches of anarchism, but they had to hide because they are very closely watched by FSB, which is the former KGB, the successor of KGB, and they had a lot of problems with their concerts and with their activities. But we had a lot of friends among them. Yeah.
If we talk about rock after Yeltsin, do you consider to be Russian rock groups like Friday, Пятница, which is more like hip hop, or Leningrad, or Zimoviy Zverey, which is with winter camp for animals? So those are three different groups, but I know that they're very famous and lots of people like those groups. Do you think it's still the same tradition of Russian rock, or it's something completely different? All three groups are very different from each other as well.
Yeah. You said Leningrad, Zimoviy Zverey, and first one? Пятница. I think they got influences of 80s too in their music anyway, because I remember the leader of the Leningrad band who came to me 20 years ago. He said, "I'm your fan," for example, and so they listened to us, and of course somehow we are connected. We influenced each other, and they are very different. But the problem is that during the last, some of them are still trying to keep silence about what's going on. So that was a very popular idea, which was supported by Putin's media. Just the art is not a political thing. Don't mix the art and politics. A lot of musicians like that idea, so they, we will not mix. We will say our zone of comfort is safe because we are real art artists. We are high. We are philosophers. So that was a very popular idea until last 2 years. And Zimovia is very intellectual, and they are trying to express themselves in that way. They also have some songs, as I know, have some songs about it. But anyway, and Leningrad started during the last year. Before that, the leader of the band was against any meetings, and he was laughing at that. He was ironical. He was kind of supporting Kremlin. But I think the time of hype for protest came. So they will be in the place where hype is. Okay. Yeah.
Do you have trouble when you're crossing over the border, or do you feel like FSB watches you when you're spending time in Russia at these times? Do you feel like FSB is watching you or your connections, or do they question the border at all?
No questions on the border. I don't think. Sometimes I hear some strange clicks, and my friends told me that now you are heard, you are listened to when I'm in Russia. But I during the last 2 years I'm coming for 3 weeks each 2 months. So I think they're controlling nowadays those who are very active in organizing anything in the street, because it's too many for them. There should be too many of them to control everything. So I remember, like 2.5 years ago, we were under the strict control because we took part in the street actions. We were organizers of several festivals, marches of dissenters, and I remember there were several people coming after us with camera like this from their bags, which it was obviously they were shooting every episode in a cafe. We were talking and they were shooting. Then we made jokes on them. They had to go after you during the whole day, for example, because it's a day before the meeting. So that's how it works. Not all the time, but they will listen to you. They will follow you if you have any power to organize something in the street. That's how it works in Russia. Yeah.
I have a comment and question. Like the old rebels, kind of as they get older, seem to tend to get more conservative. I watched an interview with Johnny Rotten of Sex Pistols, who was speaking, say, for Trump, for Boris, the new British Prime. Yeah, Johnson. So, what do you think of that? Like those punk rockers who were against everything, now that they're old, they seem to be on the other side. Now, there's a saying, like, when you are young and you're not a progressive, you have no heart. When you are old and you're not conservative, you have no brain. What do you think? How does it apply to you and other musicians who age?
I heard it many times. I think it's a bullshit. Yes, very useful bullshit for those who want to rule over the others. So yeah, people can change, of course, but to be the old conformist, it's probably not the good end for your life. So we had the same problem with a lot of bands I showed today, and their leaders, they're getting more and more, how to say, not conformist, let's say. And some of them like love Putin and took part in their concerts, and I think it's I know a lot of people who didn't change in how to say, in the point of acceptance, the truth of reality which is changing around. So being sincere, accepting, not enough words in my vocabulary. I mean, that's the way you. I know a lot of people who didn't change, and I like that way. I mean, they didn't change in their sincerity of being ready to interpret new changes around. Not accepted, принять, воспринять. Okay, воспринять. Observe, yeah. Okay, so I know they're like the writer Vainovich, you know him probably. Yeah, he was up to his death, which happened half a year ago. He was a very clear-minded person, and he always followed all the changes which took part in Russia, and he always reacted very seriously, and like he did all 40 years before. And some of the others are there. I think there are a lot of reasons for that, but zone of comfort is a very strong thing, and it's hard to leave it when you are there. And a lot of our big rock stars, or like in your case, they are hiding in their zones of comfort, and they're trying to survive there inside. So that, and of course, you should have in mind that there are a lot of diseases, brain diseases, like dementia. Yeah, is it called
dementia?
Dementia. Yeah. You should consider that too. Okay. No questions. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mikhail Barzikin. Thank you very much for showing up for this event. And very special thanks to Jordan Center at NYU for organizing this wonderful event. Let me just take this opportunity.
If you're not on our email list, sign up on your way out. This is the first
Please
Jordan
do.
Center event. Yeah, sign up on the email list so we can invite you to future events as well.
And at the very end, very quick announcement. There will be a concert this Friday. The Mikhail Barzikin with the Televisor will perform a show at the club called Drum this Friday, October 4th. It starts at 7 p.m. And once again, the club is called Drum, D-R-O-M, right here in the East Village, supported by my band Interzona.